The smell of grilled steak still lingered in the air when she said it. Emily stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his back, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nathan, if it all disappeared tomorrow, I'd still be here." He looked at her, but something in her eyes told him she already knew, and suddenly the laughter around them felt like background noise to a truth he couldn't outrun. The backyard was full of life, kids chasing each other with water balloons, uncles debating over grill techniques, music floating lazily through the summer air. Nathan Ellis smiled and played along, plate in hand, laugh rehearsed. No one noticed the way his fingers trembled around his glass. From the outside, it looked like everything was in place. A loving wife, a beautiful daughter, a tech company the town bragged about. But inside, he was unraveling. The bank accounts were nearly empty. The investors had pulled out. The lawsuits were coming. He hadn't told Emily, not yet, and now, standing beside her father's grill, with cousins and neighbors joking around him, Nathan felt like a man on a sinking ship, waving to people on the shore. This is the story of how he lost everything: status, money, pride, and discovered the one thing he thought he could never count on: love that stays. But that day, he still had no idea what was coming. Nathan Ellis wasn't born into privilege. His dad, a mechanic in a small Oregon town, used to say, "We don't get rich, we get resourceful." Nathan took that to heart. By 15, he was fixing computers out of their garage. By 22, he'd moved to Portland with a backpack, a broken phone, and a business plan written on cafe napkins. He built his tech startup, Evolink, with late nights, instant noodles, and a fierce belief that he could make something bigger than himself. And for a while, it worked. Investors called. Articles were written. His software for remote rural education caught fire during the pandemic. He and Emily moved into a bigger house, bought a car that didn't squeak, took Lily to the coast for the first time. But even with success, Nathan never shook the feeling that it could all disappear. Emily grounded him. She was steady, a third-grade teacher who still packed handwritten notes in Lily's lunchbox. She didn't care about the stock prices or the Forbes under 35 nonsense. When he proposed, he did it in the school library, between storybooks and spelling posters. She said yes without hesitation. But that was before Derek Vaughan. Derek was sharp, charming, and reckless. He joined Evolink as co-founder, brought flashy connections and risky expansion ideas. Nathan, eager to grow fast, said yes to too much. Then came the problems. A promised funding round fell through. Then a client sued over a failed pilot. Derek disappeared for a week without explanation. Nathan tried to patch the holes, sold equipment, took silent loans, delayed salaries. He told Emily they were restructuring, nothing serious. She trusted him, but every night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, calculating losses in his head. At work, he smiled. At home, he pretended, and all the while the numbers got worse. That morning before the barbecue, he stood in the shower long after the water went cold, trying to rehearse how to tell her. He couldn't. Not yet. So he dressed, drove to her parents' house, kissed her on the cheek, carried the cooler like nothing was wrong, and it was right there, holding tongs, flipping burgers, that he realized he was lying to the only person who ever made him feel like enough, and the cracks were starting to show. Nathan used to say he wasn't building a business, he was building freedom. Freedom from counting pennies at the gas station, from watching his parents age without a safety net, from the quiet shame of wanting to give your child more than you ever had and not being able to. At Evolink's peak, that dream felt close enough to touch. The company had just closed a deal with a Midwestern school district. Journalists called his solution the future of rural learning. One investor dubbed him Silicon Valley in flannel. And Nathan, still wearing his battered sneakers, felt unstoppable. He talked about buying Emily's dream house, the one with the wraparound porch and lemon tree in the yard. They even toured it once. Lily picked her bedroom. There was talk of expanding to South America. Derek said they'd open an office in Sao Paulo. Global impact, he called it. Nathan was cautious, but curious. He started sketching new features, hiring faster, renting bigger office space. He ignored the little signs, a delayed payment here, a missed email there, a weird phone call from a VC contact asking why Derek hadn't shown up to a scheduled pitch. Still, Nathan believed in the mission, believed he could outwork any problem. Until it hit. One Friday morning, he opened his inbox to a legal notice. A former client, a charter school chain, was suing EvoLink for breach of contract. The software hadn't worked the way they'd promised. The case could drag for months. Then, days later, Derek vanished. Not just from the office, completely. His phone was disconnected. His email bounced. Nathan tried calling contacts. No one knew where he was. Some hinted at rumors, debts, past lawsuits, a pattern, and Nathan. He was left to pick up the pieces. He liquidated what he could, delayed more payments, told his team it was a temporary adjustment. Emily noticed. She asked gently if everything was okay. He said yes, said it was just a slowdown, said she didn't need to worry. That night, she brought him tea and sat beside him while he stared blankly at spreadsheets. She didn't press, but the worry in her eyes lingered. Then came the meeting with their largest client. Nathan hoped to renegotiate. Instead, they pulled out, quietly, without drama. That same afternoon, the company's bank account was frozen due to the lawsuit. He sat alone in the empty office, lights off, computer humming in the dark. The silence felt final. But Nathan still clung to one thought. I can fix this, I have to. Because the alternative, telling Emily everything, felt worse than bankruptcy. He wasn't just afraid of losing money, he was afraid of losing how she looked at him. He sold the car first. Quietly, told Emily he wanted to go green and started biking to the co-working space he could barely afford. She smiled and kissed his cheek, proud of his new, eco-conscious decision. Then came the team. He let 3 people go under the excuse of pivoting. One of them cried. Another just nodded. He must have seen it coming. After that, he sublet the office and moved operations into the guest room. Lily asked why Daddy was home so much. Emily said he was lucky to work near her, but luck had nothing to do with it anymore. Nathan had maxed out 2 credit cards. He owed back taxes. The bank had started sending red envelopes, thick ones. And still, he couldn't say the words. I lost everything. He practiced in the mirror, in the car, even during dinner once. Chicken Alfredo, Lily singing some school song. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. What did you say to someone who built their life on believing in you? He started having migraines. Couldn't sleep. Sometimes he'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, certain the ceiling was about to cave in. The worst came one morning when he tried to buy milk and his card declined. He dug through the glove compartment, found 3 crumpled dollar bills and coins, and stood in line praying no one he knew walked in. That night, he sat in the living room after everyone had gone to bed, lights off, laptop glowing. He searched. How to file for bankruptcy without your spouse knowing. The next weekend was the Carter family barbecue. Emily begged him to go. It had been weeks since they saw her parents. He almost said no, but guilt pushed him there. He stood in the yard, surrounded by folding chairs and cheap beer, his shirt sticking to his back, smile painted on like a mask. And then it happened. Uncle Mike, Emily's uncle, always loud, always watching, slapped Nathan on the back and joked loud enough for half the yard to hear, "So, Nate, when's the IPO? Or did the golden boy already cash out and run?" Laughter. Nathan froze. Emily looked at him, slowly, carefully. Something in her expression changed. Later, while guests gathered near the dessert table, she pulled him aside. "Tell me the truth," she said softly. His throat closed. She waited, eyes calm. He said nothing. That night, after they put Lily to bed, Nathan finally broke. He sat on the edge of the tub, hands shaking, tears coming hot and sudden. Emily found him there. He looked up, ashamed. "I lost everything, Em," he whispered. "The money's gone. The company's done. I lied to you. I lied to everyone. I don't even know who I am anymore." She didn't speak at first, just sat beside him on the bathroom floor. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "I just didn't know how bad. I didn't tell you because I thought, if you knew you'd leave." Emily turned to him, eyes red but steady. "I didn't marry a company," she said. "I married you." He broke again, this time into her shoulder. But even in that moment, part of him still didn't believe it. Part of him thought she'd wake up tomorrow and realize the life they had was over, and she'd be gone too. Because love like that, he wasn't sure it existed. Not anymore. The next morning, the world looked exactly the same. Dirty dishes, bills stacked on the counter, Lily humming in the hallway, oblivious to the storm that had hit. But inside Nathan, something had shifted. Emily hadn't left. She didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't retreat. She made coffee, sat across from him at the table, her hair still damp from the shower, fingers wrapped around the same chip mug she always used. "Okay," she said simply. "Let's figure it out." Nathan stared at her. "You're not angry?" She nodded slowly. "I'm angry that you went through this alone, but I'm not angry at you." He lowered his eyes, guilt pressing into his chest. "I thought I had to fix it all before I told you. Like, if I could just make it right again, you'd never have to see the mess." Emily reached across the table, resting her hand over his. "I don't need perfect, I need honest." That hit harder than any invoice or legal notice. For so long, Nathan had equated his worth with output. Revenue, applause, praise. But here was someone looking at his bare, broken self and still choosing him. He didn't know what to do with that. Later that day, while Lily napped, Nathan opened his laptop, not to check the company's death rattle of an account, but to write. Not code, not a pitch deck, just thoughts, regret, fear, gratitude. He didn't know what it would become, but for the first time he wasn't writing to impress anyone. He was writing because it felt like breathing again. That night he and Emily lay in bed, backs touching. The silence wasn't cold, it was safe. He whispered, "I don't know what's next." She replied, "That makes two of us." And then she reached for his hand beneath the covers. It wasn't a plan, it wasn't a solution, but it was something real. And after everything, that was enough to start. The next few weeks were quiet, but not peaceful. Nathan sold off what little was left of EvoLink. Some outdated gear, a few remaining licenses, a truckload of guilt. He emailed former clients to apologize. Some responded, most didn't. Emily went back to work full-time. Her classroom needed her. They rearranged schedules, split daycare pickups, cut every unnecessary expense. No more takeout, no more streaming services. Lily didn't understand, but she didn't complain. They sold the house. It was the hardest decision so far. The porch, the lemon tree, the room Lily had claimed as her castle. Gone. They moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment near Emily's school. Water-stained ceiling, loud neighbors, but rent was manageable, and for the first time in months, the math actually added up. Nathan started freelancing, fixing small business websites, helping a retired mechanic set up an online catalog. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. At night he kept writing, not for money, just to process. Sometimes it came out as journal entries. Other nights, letters he never sent, to his dad, to Derek, even to Lily in the future. Emily read one of them by accident. She cried. "You should share this," she said. "No one cares about a guy who fell on his face," Nathan replied. "Maybe," she said, "but a lot of people are still lying there." Something about that stayed with him. He started walking more. No music, no phone, just him and the sound of gravel underfoot. Sometimes, in the stillness, he felt something flicker. Not hope, exactly, but the beginning of it. The email arrived on a Tuesday. Subject line, "We want to help you get back on your feet." It was from a man Nathan barely remembered, someone he'd met once at a tech event in Vegas. Now he ran a shady venture recovery firm that specialized in turning bankrupt startups into lean cash cows. "We can wipe out your personal debt in 6 months. The email promised. No questions asked. All it required was one partnership. One tiny corner cut. Nathan stared at the screen for a long time. The thought of security, even if it was built on compromise, was tempting. He didn't mention it to Emily right away. Instead, he closed the laptop and made coffee. But that night, guilt made him restless. He told her. She didn't yell, but she did say, "Please, no more masks. If we're going to rebuild, it has to be with truth." He nodded, but the shame lingered. Later that week, after tucking Lily into bed, Nathan sat alone on the floor, knees pulled to his chest. He whispered to himself, "What if I fail again?" And deeper still, what if I was never enough to begin with? Just then, the phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. But something in his gut told him to pick up. "Mr. Ellis, this is Rachel Miller. I run the senior project program over at Lincoln High. We heard about your old company and your story. One of our teachers said you might be the kind of guest speaker our kids need right now." Nathan nearly laughed. A guest speaker. He was broke, worn out, barely hanging on. "You sure you've got the right guy?" he asked. "We don't need a millionaire," she replied. "We need someone real." He said he'd think about it. Emily found him standing in the kitchen, staring out the window at the rusted fire escape. When he told her about the call, she didn't hesitate. "You should go." "Why? So I can tell a room full of kids how I crashed and burned?" "No," she said. "So you can show them what it looks like to get back up." He said yes. The day of the talk, he wore his only clean shirt and borrowed a belt from a neighbor. The classroom wasn't full, maybe 30 students, some bored, some curious. A few recognized his name from local headlines. A few whispered. Nathan didn't use slides, didn't bring notes. He just told the truth. About building something from nothing, about chasing growth so fast he forgot why he started, about trust misplaced, silence chosen over vulnerability, and the lie that your worth is tied to your success. And then, about the night his wife sat on a bathroom floor and chose him anyway. For a moment, the room was completely still. Then a student in the back raised his hand. "My dad went bankrupt last year," he said. "He hasn't talked about it once." Nathan looked at him and said the only thing that felt right. Then maybe he's still carrying it alone. Afterwards, a few students came up to thank him. One teacher hugged him. But it wasn't their words that stuck. It was the feeling of saying everything out loud, of being seen and still standing. That night, back home, Emily was grading papers on the couch. Lily had fallen asleep with a crayon in her hand. Nathan sat beside them, pulled a blanket over their legs and whispered, "I think I found something today." Emily looked up. "Hope?" He shook his head. "Home." Months passed. Nathan started a small podcast, The Other Side of Falling. Not viral, but steady. He shared stories, invited guests, talked about the things people are usually too afraid to say. Emily's school asked her to run a mentorship program. They weren't rich, but they were real. And one afternoon, they hosted a cookout at their apartment building. Cheap burgers, folded lawn chairs, kids everywhere. Nathan flipped the meat while Emily brought out lemonade. Someone asked him how he was doing. He smiled. "Honestly, the best I've ever been." And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. Years later, no one remembered the failed startup. The articles stopped. The gossip faded. Even Derek Vaughan's name had been buried under 100 newer scandals. But Nathan Ellis still remembered everything, not to relive the shame, but to remember what it gave him. He and Emily eventually bought a small home on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a garden Emily filled with herbs and stubborn tomato vines. Lily had a swing in the backyard and a closet full of second-hand books. Nathan never went back to tech. He didn't want to. Instead, he focused on his podcast, his writing, and a local non-profit that helped first-generation kids launch their own projects. He mentored slowly, personally, honestly. He talked to them about failure like it was a tool, not a tombstone. One afternoon, after a school event, a teenager pulled him aside and said, "I didn't think people like you got back up." Nathan smiled. "Sometimes, falling is the only way you remember what really holds you." That night he stood on the porch as the sun dipped behind the hills. Emily came out, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. She didn't ask what he was thinking. She just stood beside him like she always had. And he knew, without titles, without money, without applause, he was enough. Because the real win wasn't rebuilding the empire. It was never having to wear the mask again. Maybe you've been there too. Not at the top, but at the edge, where everything you built starts to slip through your fingers and the silence gets so loud you forget how to ask for help. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt the fear of not being enough without your achievements, leave a comment. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear tonight. And if you believe in the kind of love that stays even when everything else falls away, hit like. Subscribe, because around here we tell stories that don't pretend. Stories about falling, yes, but mostly about what happens when we decide to rise anyway, and who we become when there's nothing left to hide.